Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT How to Play video. Today our analyst will be diving into how to play Spirit Shade in patch 1020. Spirit Shade is one of the several spirit-based compositions that has been doing well since the second half of 1019. We'll be breaking down when you should play this composition along with the core items and champions. After that, we'll do a rundown of each stage of the game. With all that said, let's dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back into the video. But before we dive into the actual composition, let's first talk about when you should play Spirit Shade. The basic overview of the composition is that you're using the attack speed buff from Force Spirit to make your Shade champions attack faster and make use of the Shade trait as much as possible. That means that you'll need Force Spirit and preferably a Zed chosen to make this composition optimal. We'll get into the item specifics, but the core of the composition heavily relies on RE2, Zed3, and later on, Kain. If you can secure a chosen Zed early on in the game, it's a great way to ease your way into Spirit Shade. Without chosen Zed or chosen Evelyn, it can be a lot harder to make this build work. In that case, you can still try to make it work, but you'll definitely need to push levels to get Kain too. Keep in mind that this build is quite contested along with quite a few other Spirit builds, so you may find yourself rolling against others to find Zed, Ahri, and Kain. If that's the case, it's better to pivot into a different direction unless you've managed to find a chosen Shade Zed. Okay, it's time to move on and talk about the core items for Spirit Shade. To start, let's break down the champions you'll want to itemize for the build to do well. Zed is your main carry, so you want to prioritize the items on him. Ahri is partially a secondary carry, but also your frontline, so while Zed items take precedence over hers, you really want at least a few items on her. Other than Zed and Ahri, the only other champion you really need to give items to is Kain. Kain can use practically any item, but defensive items or spell power items are great on him. Don't worry too much about getting the perfect items on Kain, as you're unlikely to find him early enough in the game to have specific items saved for him. Before we talk about Zed, let's quickly go over items for Ahri. Ahri, as we mentioned, is going to be your front line as you want her to cast early on in the fight. To do this effectively in the front, she will absolutely need a Guardian Angel. Without it, there's almost no chance that she actually casts in a fight, whereas with it, she consistently will. And all you need is Ahri to cast once to get the Spirit buff. Besides GA, there's not really any specifics that you need to prioritize for Ahri versus Zed. But if you can, try to grab components to make a Jeweled Gauntlet or a blue buff. Jeweled Gauntlet adds a ton of damage to her ability, and while you don't necessarily need the extra damage, it is helpful. Alright, on to the Zed items. Zed has 3 specific items to make him a beast of a carry. Those 3 are Rage Blade, Rapid Fire Cannon, and Quicksilver. RFC allows him to attack without moving around consistently, and Rage Blade, along with the Spirit buff, will quickly get him towards the attack speed cap. Quicksilver overall is a must-have on any carry. In terms of the importance, try to secure RFC and Quicksilver first, as those two will help a ton in allowing Zed to pop off in fights. This means that you may want to prioritize either Bow or Glove from the starting carousel. Bow generally is better if you're intending to play Zed because you'll need at least 3 for perfect items. If you're not able to get a Rage Blade, you can play any damage item on him like Giant Slayer, Death Blade, or Infinity Edge, but a great alternative is also Hand of Justice. Quicksilver can be replaced by Guardian Angel or Trap Claw, but it's preferable to have Quicksilver. And RFC is not really negotiable, you surely need to get it. Let's move on to the core champions and traits for Spirit Shade. As the name of the composition implies, you're mainly going to be focusing on Spirit and Shade champions. The endgame goal of this composition is Zed, Evelyn, and Kain for Shade with the chosen Shade. Ideally, you want to have chosen on your Zed, but Evelyn is okay as the 4 Shade buff is a lot of extra damage. Since you're running a chosen Shade, that means your Spirit champions have to be Ahri, Yuumi, Kindred, and Teemo. It is possible to play this build with a Spirit chosen, but ideally you want Shade. So what else can you add into this composition? Mystic is an easy choice since you already have Mystic with Yuumi. Any Mystic can do well, though Cassiopeia is generally the best mid-game to play Dusk with, and Zillion is the best late game. Janna is not bad as well since her shields are strong in addition to adding extra damage. Shen is the only other Mystic, and you want to avoid it since he's a ninja. Other than Mystic, it's not a bad idea to just run strong frontline champions with CC like Sejuani or Aatrox. Late game, you can pick up legendary units like Set or Lee Sin. Overall, this build is quite flexible in addition to the units and traits you can play as long as you have the core of Zed, Evelyn, Ari, Kindred, Yumi, and Teemo, with Kayn added in the late game. Next, we'll be breaking down each stage of the game, starting with the early game. There's quite a few ways the early game can be played, as you can level aggressively, not level at all, or play to win streak or lose streak. What it all hinges on is the PvE drops you're given and whether or not you get a good early game chosen. First, let's talk about finding an early chosen. Obviously, you can't predict what you're going to get, but your ultimate goal is to find a chosen Shade Zed. It's not going to happen every game, which means you shouldn't overly force this composition. But to make it easier to find a Z2, you can either delay picking up an early chosen or sell whatever chosen champion you got on Krugs. The reason for selling an early chosen on Krugs is that you want to have a chance at finding a Shade chosen during Stage 3. You can keep the early chosen if it's paramount to you win streaking. The chosen traits you find early game include Cultist, Duelist, and Keeper. They can often net you a win streak during Stage 2. As far as leveling goes, you may want to level early to 5 on 2-5 or pre-leveling on 2-4. Doing this means that you've leveled to 4 earlier, either on 2-1 or 2-2. The purpose of having level 5 early is simply to have a chance at finding Ari. Ari is really contested in the current meta, so finding one as quickly as possible is ideal. Overall, your goal is to try to find Zed and a strong chosen champion to win streak until Krugs. If you can't find either, then playing for Econ is fine, which means you want to lose streak until Krugs. In general, it's okay to lose early game for the additional streak, gold, and having an earlier pick on the 2-4 carousel. With the early game out of the way, let's move on into the mid game. The mid game generally begins during the latter parts of Stage 3, but we're going to scale it back to talk about what you should try to do after Krugs. As we mentioned in the early game, your goal is to try and find Zed, preferably a chosen Shade Zed and Ari. There's not much you can actively do about this, but you can scout to see if others have found those two champions yet. To help increase your odds at finding Ari, you will want to level on the standard timing of 3-2 for level 6. At this point of the game, you can either decide to stay on level 6, get to 50 gold and slow roll your composition in Z3, or play to level 7 by 4-1. Whether you're level 6 or 7, the goal is the same, as you want to slow roll and find Z3. Don't do this if others are contesting Zed, as you're going to instead want to stabilize your composition first and then play for level 8 to look for Kayn. Kayn will make up the power difference of not being able to run Z3, though make sure you're still buying Zeds to slow down any other players looking for him. So when should you roll on 6 instead of 7? Basically, if you're uncontested and have chosen Shade Zed with at least a minimum of 5 Zeds, you can easily roll on 6 and find Z3 relatively quickly. Of course, luck does play a role here, but if you're not being contested, he really shouldn't be too difficult to 3-star. The reason for doing it on 6 is to hit an earlier power spike in the lobby to win streak with, so that you can skip to level 8 and find Kayn. Rolling on 7 is the standard option, as you're more likely to find Ari2 by rolling. It also allows you to potentially hit an early Kayn. Either way, whichever level you decide to roll on, you should keep scouting to see if anyone else has found Zed, Ari, or Kayn. The goal for the mid game is simply to get in your Spirit Shade composition and roll for upgrades. Never all in your gold unless you're at very low health. While you do want Z3, you still need to have economy left over to level to 8 and look for Kayn to help with your late game. And that's a good time to transition over to talking about the late game. Overall, the late game is about 2 things: upgrading your existing composition and finding Kayn 2. That does mean you're going to want to eventually level to 8, which can be done early if you don't think that Z3 is doable, or later if you're still slow rolling. The current standard time for a normal level 8 is roughly around 5-1 after Raptors. This isn't a hard rule by any means, as it's normal to level anytime during Stage 5. A late level 8 is usually during the Dragon PvE round, so try to level before then if possible. Let's talk about the ideal circumstances once you're level 8 and it's near the end of Stage 5. At this point, you should have all of your champions 2-starred, a Z3, or close to hitting the Z3. Kayn doesn't necessarily need to be upgraded yet, but you should have at least found him. From this point, you've got 2 options. The first can be to level to 9. Leveling to 9 in general for set 4 tends to be a bait more than anything. Committing 80 gold is a lot for not that big of a power spike unless you're already in a dominant position and can continuously roll after leveling to 9 to find legendary champions. But if you've hit Z3 and at least one Kayn, you're likely strong enough to slowly make your way to level 9 over the course of 3 or 4 rounds. Once you're level 9, the goal is to find Kane 3 and play an extra legendary champion like Set, Zillion, and Lee Sin. The other option you have in the late game is to roll for Ari3 and Evelyn 3. Evelyn 3 doesn't really matter as much, but if you have the economy to do it and keep hitting her in your shop, it's okay to do. RE3 is great if you can find her, but keep in mind that you're likely going to be contested by others, so scout before making this your game plan. Late game is all about leveling your current options to get stronger versus leveling to 9. If you're too low on health, usually below 30 or so, it is best to roll and become as strong as you can at level 8. If you're doing well in the late game and have hit what you need at level 8, it's a good time to think about leveling to 9. Either way, make sure you're spending your gold before you lose, as you don't want to end the game with 50 gold. That is going to be it for today's video, folks. Spirit has really opened up a lot of potential builds and is still doing well despite the nerf it received in 1020. Spirit Shade can be difficult to get consistently, but it can easily earn you a top 3 spot when you manage to secure all the essential pieces. Let us know in the comment section below what you think about the Spirit Shade composition and if there's any builds you'd like us to cover in the future. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.